What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am excited to be showing off my Don Quixote Doflamingo 7 Warlords of the Sea deck profile. This is a very powerful leader in the meta currently. This is a leader that's actually been around since the very first set of the game. However, it wasn't until the newest support that dropped in the starter deck for him where he finally had the tools to put him above the competition and really put him into the meta and is a force to be reckoned with. So I'm excited to show off the build, but before I do, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fans of content like this. So I'm going to go ahead and start the profile by going over the leader, of course, but I did want to quickly show that I was accompanying the deck with the 7 Warlords of the Sea Don, which I just felt was perfect theming for the 7 Warlords deck. So let's take a look at what the leader does. So I always felt as though this leader had potential all the way from the very first set of the game. It just didn't quite have the support. It didn't quite have the support that it needed to really get legs and get off the ground. And now I feel as though the newest cards really take him over the top. And I gotta say, I do really like the way the alternate art looks in the newest starter deck for the Doflamingo. Definitely a I just prefer it more than the manga panels or the manga faces for sure. But it's just a personal preference. So what does the leader do? For 2 Don, when attacking, you pay a Don. Reveal a card from the top of the deck, and if it has the 7 Warlords of the Sea type character card with a cost of 4 or less, you can play the card rested. So as you can imagine, most of the deck is 4 or less to help you facilitate the ability as easily as possible and as consistently as possible. We want to abuse the leader ability as much as we can, so there are now ways in which we are able to manipulate the top of our deck way more consistently than we have ever been able to before, and the payoffs for the cards that we can play off of the leader effect for free are just extremely powerful. So let's go ahead and take a look at the build itself and go over what the cards do. I'm choosing to play 4 copies of the former Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Sengoku is a 1-cost searcher for the deck, so the on-play ability lets you look at the top 5 cards of the deck, and if it's a 7 Warlords, you get to add it to your hand, and the rest go to the bottom of the deck in any order. So this is one of the most powerful cards because of the fact that not only does it allow you to stick a body onto the field, but it also replaces itself in giving you an additional card of your choice from among the top 5. So yeah, Sengoku is one of the cornerstones of the deck, and consistency is key, and in my opinion, you want to be able to see him in your opening hand. I also am accompanying the Sengoku with 4 copies of the 1-drop buggy. That is not only a 2K counter, but also has the on-play ability to let you look at the top 3 cards of the deck and place them at the top of the deck in any order. So this is a way in which you are able to set up your Doflamingo ability, because with just a little bit of memorization, you are able to remember the cards that you put back in the order that you want to be able to use your Doflamingo's leader ability, and you'll be able to guarantee what that card is that you're going to play off of the effect, so it isn't as random as it may seem. So 4 copies of Buggy, honestly, it is a perfect card to complement the strategy. I'm also playing 3 copies of Perona, actually. It was previously a 4 of when we did not have the options that we have today, but is still a very powerful card nonetheless. It has the on-play ability to look at the top 5 cards of the deck and rearrange them and put them at the top or bottom of the deck in that order that you place them in. So still very solid. It searches 5 more as opposed to the 3 from the buggy, which of course is better, because as long as you are keeping a mental note of the cards that you're putting back, then you will know what cards you will be able to either set up for your draws or set up for your leader ability. We have so many better options now, so I don't necessarily need to see her at 4, especially since she is not a 7 Warlords of the Sea type character, but still a good tech nonetheless. I am also choosing to play 4 copies of the 3-drop Doflamingo, which has fallen out of favor, but personally, I still enjoy being able to have a relatively cheap blocker that I could potentially play off of my leader ability, and it has a secondary ability that lets you look at the top 5 cards of the deck and rearrange them in any order and put them back at the top or the bottom. So as you can see, the theming is really just trying to make sure that you are stacking the deck to your liking as much as possible. And beforehand, when I was not playing the Doflamingo, the only other blocker would be our Boa Hancock, and you're not always going to see her. Even with all the searching that you do, it's just a possibility that you won't see her. So I wanted a secondary blocker that I could play that was relatively cheap. The attack leaves much to be desired for sure. You'd certainly want to be able to have something that's maybe a little bit stronger, but the fact that it lets you stack the deck is a blocker is just a nice 2-in-1 for me. So now one of the more busted cards to drop from the starter deck itself, and that is 4 copies of my man Trafalgar Law. He is a 4-drop character that has the on play to let you return one of your characters to the hand. And if your leader has the 7 Warlords of the Sea type, which it does, you can return up to 1 character with a cost of 4 less to the owner's hand, which is just busted. The fact that you are able to essentially set your opponent back an entire turn by forcing them to add back the card that they had to invest Don and a whole turn into playing is really good tempo and is able to help swing the game into your favor. And the fact that you're returning one of your cards, let's say you ended up playing something like your Buggy earlier on so that you could utilize the effect to stack the deck, you could go ahead and bounce this back to your hand, which now gives you a 2,000 counter or a card that you can use to stack the deck later on. So the bouncing one of your own cards is not really all that big of a deal when you realize that you're potentially adding back cards that you could use as counter power. So yeah, Trafalgar Law is just an insane card for the deck, and the fact that you're able to cheat them off of the leader ability is the nice icing on the cake. I am also choosing to play 4 copies of Boa Hancock. Also an incredible addition from the new starter deck. It is a 4-cost blocker that has a very strong on-play ability to let you look at the top 3 cards of the deck, place them back in any order, you get the deal, but you then give a rested Don to one of your 7 Warlords of the Sea type leader or character cards. So this is fantastic because no matter what, you are if you did decide to go into your Hancock by paying the Don, it guarantees that one of the Don that you used to be able to go into the Boa was essentially being given to your leader or one of your other characters for free. A lot of the time, you're going to be able to cheat this out off of your leader Doflamingo's effect as well, and this is just incredible to have a 6,000 power as well. So Boa is very, very strong for the deck. I highly recommend being able to play 4 copies, as it's definitely one of the main cards that you are going to want to cheat off of your leader ability. Now, I am choosing to play 3 copies of Edward Weevil, the 4-cost 6,000 power that has the on-play to draw card. Still a very solid card. The fact that I'm not playing 4 is more so because of the fact that he does not have a counter. So sometimes there are moments where he can just be a brick even though he does replace himself. A lot of the time you're going to want to be able to cheat it off of the leader ability or cheat it off of the Jimbei, but you're not always going to be able to see the Jimbei. So yeah, I just figured obviously if you want to be able to play the 4, then that is perfectly acceptable. I've just felt as though I never really needed all 4. I'm also choosing to play 3 copies of Gecko Moria, so this is an instance in which if you were interested in playing the 4th Weevil, you certainly could swap one of the Morias, but this is one of the best cards in the grind game because on play it allows you to add a 7 Warlords type character card. It also adds Thriller Bark, but we're not playing those characters, with a cost of 4 or less, which is most of the deck, back to your hand. So this is what makes it so that even if you end up having to use cards as counter power, or if you ended up losing them in battle to one of your opponent's characters, then you will always be able to add that card back to be able to cheat off of the leader ability again, or to be able to play off Jimbei, or potentially give you a free 2,000 power count, 2,000 counter power character cards. The possibilities with Moria are endless, and that is why I do enjoy playing the 3 copies, so that you can, and if you need to enter the grind game, you are more than prepared to do so. For another 2K, I am playing 4 copies of the 4-drop Trafalgar Law. It has the activate main. You can return this card to the hand, which is great because it's a 2K counter. And if your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand, your opponent places 1 card from their hand to the bottom of the deck. So this is fantastic. Again, tempo is really the name of the game, and the fact that this card makes it so that your opponent is going to be weary about having too many cards in their hand, because there's the possibility that you may just be able to end up removing it yourself anyway with the Trafalgar Law, always keeps your opponent on their toes, and it's cheatable off of the leader ability. So honestly, a very solid card all around. For another 2K, I am playing 4 copies of the 4-drop Crocodile with the on-play that lets you rest a Don to be able to return a character with a cost of 2 or less to the owner's hand. So to be honest with you, we really mostly use them as a 2K counter. Worst case scenario, if you do need to be able to cheat it off of a Jimbei or the leader ability, then you most certainly can, but I really do just like having it as a 2K that is within the theme of the deck. And as I alluded to, we are playing 4 copies of Jimbei. I really just wanted to be able to start with all the other cards just because I wanted you to see all of the things that Jimbei, not only the leader ability, but what Jimbei is able to cheat out as well. It's a 4-cost 5,000 power with the on-play to play a 7 Warlords card with a cost of 4 or less from your hand. So essentially all of the cards that we've gone up that were the 4 costs that we've discussed up until this point, they can all be played off of the Jimbei as well, which is just incredibly powerful. You are spamming out lots of characters, and you are going to have a large board presence, and in doing so, you are going to steamroll your opponent, especially if you see Jimbei in succession and you see multiple copies. It just feels as though, honestly, you are cheating with the amount of advantage that you are gaining. So 4 copies of Jimbei is an absolute must in my opinion. And now I'm playing 4 copies of arguably one of the most busted cards in the deck, and the sleeper Marshall D. Teach. Now this is one of the best support cards I have ever seen, and honestly what makes me feel like the deck is just unfair, because of the fact that you activate main once per turn, place a card from your hand to the top of the deck, and then give up to 2 rested Dawn to your leader or one of your characters. What were they thinking? I mean, it would have been amazing just off of the first effect alone, being able to essentially, as long as the Teach sticks, you are going to be able to stack your deck with anything from your hand, always setting up your leader ability. So this is honestly, it doesn't have to rest itself. So if your opponent wants to be able to get rid of it, they wouldn't be able to attack into it. They would have to actually find some type of removal, which not all decks have at their disposal. The two Rested Dawn just kills me. Like, the card did not need to do that, and yet here we are, because the 2 Rested Dawn is the Dawn that you can then use to establish your leader abilities effect. So the card just feels unfair, in my opinion, and if they were to ever touch this deck in any capacity, I would recommend this, to be honest. But yeah, I feel as though Teach just really allows for this deck to do some very degenerate things, and that's why I choose to play 4 copies. I see numbers all around when it comes to Teach, I personally just don't understand it. I feel as though in a deck where you really want to abuse your leader ability as much as possible, Teach not only helps you do that, but also provides you with free Dawn, especially for the rest of the game, essentially. So the Teach is a 4 of, in my opinion. For some additional text, I'm choosing to play 3 copies of the 4-drop Pudding, which says on play your opponent returns all cards in their hand to their deck, shuffles, and then draws 5 cards. So this is going to be here to punish our opponent for trying to play a little bit more defensively and a little bit more kind of trying to hoard as much card advantage as possible, as that is certainly a strategy you can use to combat the deck. However, the Pudding is essentially a fear tactic, because as long as your opponent sees it, that means that they are going to be weary about having too many cards in your hand, because they give you that much more incentive to go into the Pudding. So I like it as a scare tactic for sure, and there are going to be moments where you will catch your opponent slipping. They'll have a ton of cards in their hand, and you just go ahead and potentially minus them, which off of just 1 card is honestly absurd. So the only downside being that it is not a 7 Warlord, so can't be cheated off of Leader or Jimbei, but who cares when you could, if your opponent has 8 cards in hand, put down a Pudding and put them down to 5. So you just told me that for 4 Dawn, I was able to essentially make them go -3 in card advantage. Yeah, sign me up for that. So 3 Pudding is certainly a nice tech. You can play around with the ratios, but that is what works for me. And last but not least, you may have seen in the thumbnail, I am choosing to play 2 copies of My Man Sanji, and I just got to say, the artwork on this card is just gorgeous. They always do Sanji really nicely. The flames in all of the different colors. In this one, the flames being just such a beautiful blue hue. It is just a card that, honestly, I don't necessarily need to play, but Sanji's my boy, so I have to represent him in this deck. So what does he do? So it's not that he's just my boy. He is actually a very strong card in this strategy. He is a 9-drop, 9,000 power with the on play to reveal a card from the top of the deck and then play up to 1 character with a cost of 9 or less other than himself, and then place the rest at the bottom of the deck, assuming that you did not find a card that fulfills that condition. So with the Teach out, you could pretty much just put whatever you want at the top of the deck, then guaranteeing that your Sanji will be able to go through. You can go into ahead and do something like play a Sanji into a Jimbei, which will then trigger its on play to then let you play another Warlord from your hand. So though this is not mandatory at all, it is just a fun card to be able to play that does actually have some synergy with the deck. I've seen many other different types of top ends, including the 10-drop Kaida, which lets you draw 4 cards on its on play. So there are different cards that you can play in this slot for sure. However, I just found as though this was not only synergistic, but just a lot of fun to play, even if it might end up being overkill. So guys, that's going to be it for the profile. Hopefully you found some value in watching my profile. If you are interested in One Piece content, I do have a One Piece deck profile playlist, so you can check out other types of builds that I have worked on in the past. And I do all types of content, so I do Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, so if you are interested in my content, feel free to check out those other playlists if you dabble in other card games. This has been Gamer Gauge, and until next time, GG.